welcome everybody who's starting to come in to this session. I was just beginning to explain. Matt and I had a bit of a thought festival over lunch and came up with a shape for the next 2 hours, basically. So this first session is quite literally an open invitation for you to come in and respond to one thing that has particularly piqued you, or being asked to open up something inside you, or something you are burning to ask a question about or make a comment about. So we would very much like this to be completely unstructured and completely open. So what we would ask you to do, by the way, the four of us on the screen right now represent the hardcore of the organizing team who've stuck it through from the 2 and a bit years since we started planning this event. So it's a great opportunity to say thank you to Anna and Charlotte for everything they've put into this event. As always, the organizing team becomes a bit invisible at a certain stage. So thank you very much, guys, for everything you've put into this. It's been a long journey, hasn't it? So.
And a shout out to Menu, Tony, Christos, Lucy, Misty, who have all been there for us as well and contributed to this as we go, helped us write the first call out at the start, joined us in different phases as our life circumstances moved us in one direction or another. Have I forgotten anyone? It would be terrible if I had. I don't think I have. Yeah, anyway. Yeah, thanks, guys.
Kat and the team presumably are
big time. That was coming, yeah. But no, that's a higher order.
Higher order. Thanks. I think that's right.
If you would like to come in, I see June has come in. And she went again. The idea is to simply bring yourself onto the stage, make your offering, and then leave again, so that we don't end up with hundreds of people on the stage. If you are feeling shy about doing that, we're still operating the chat, so you can put something into the session chat or the session Q&A, and that will be picked up, and we'll try and feed that in. And before we do that, lots of you have been asking about how we're going to share the various materials that we've gathered over the last 2 days and a bit. Matt?
I'm actually, you'll probably be better equipped to answer that than me. I just thought, I thought that I would just clarify, because it's the four of us who are involved in organizing it on the stage. What this isn't is a request for everyone to come on stage and tell us how wonderfully we've done and congratulate us. This is more for people to speak back to each other's input, to bring one specific thing that you've encountered here. Of course, it's lovely getting compliments. I just mean, this isn't us sitting here waiting for you all to come and say, wasn't it lovely? Yeah. Don't mean, it's not that at all. It's a chance to just try and get more the things that you might have said, but you know, the session ends, and like our session this morning with Charlotte, it finishes and we haven't got time to say. So it's that, the second.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Matt. Yeah, we definitely don't want us to be a bit like that. So how are we going to share the materials? First of all, the keynotes and last night's performances, so basically anything that was on the main stage, is already published. So it's already available. If you're in reception and you look down the list on the left, you'll see the bottom button is the replay button. So you can click on that, and there you'll find bios, keynote, and you'll find the two performances. No, you won't. We haven't published Lisa's, because she asked us not to. You'll find Emma's performance. Because we ended up having to move Jennifer from the stage to a session, we can't release that recording just yet. So the keynotes are readily available. The other Paul Michael Henry's chat is then conversation is there as well now. The other sessions, we've recorded all the sessions and some of the workshops. Some of the workshops really weren't appropriate, but where we were asked to, we recorded the workshops as well. But because we spent 10, 15 minutes before the session opened doing all the kind of housekeeping in the back, all of that's part of the recording. So we don't want to release that. So we now have a job to do to basically to download and edit all of those videos. And instead of putting them back to Hopin, we're going to move everything to the Borrowed Time website. So our Hopin presence will disappear towards the end of November because it costs us hundreds of dollars a month to keep it active, and we can simply move all the good stuff, put it on the website, and then the Hopin stuff will go away. That will happen towards the end of the month. The chat, there's lots of valuable stuff in the chat, and there's a little bit of personal stuff too. So we have the ability to download the chat, and it comes down in a rather clunky format, which allows us then to go through it and delete the bits that we are not really for publication. But there's lots of stuff for publication that is really useful, references and all kinds of things, questions. And so we will, in time, put that back onto the Borrowed Time website. And in terms of attendee lists, it's a little more complicated. Those of you who registered through the website had the opportunity to tick a box to give us permission to share your details on the delegate list. Unfortunately, those of you who registered through Hopin didn't have that opportunity, and we can't publish it until we have your okay. So hopefully today we'll be sending out an email to everybody essentially saying, if you do not want your name published on the delegate list, which will only go to delegates, it's not made public, please let us know. And we'll give you a deadline. And if you haven't let us know, your name will be included on that list, which will then too go out as an email. So it won't be on the website, but we'll send you an email with everybody's name and contact details. All of this, as you can imagine, is going to take us a wee while to get sorted, and we do also need a small break after the last few days. So it's hard to make promises. I think we'll try to get most of the videos dealt with by the end of the month, but it could take us a bit longer. So keep checking back on the Borrowed Time website is the answer.
Before the end of this first session, I'll come back with some news about more things that have yet to happen over the next month. Although it strikes me that one of them involves you, Mark, so you might like to just throw it out there yourself, which we can come to that in a sort of organic way. I feel like maybe we should allow some responses into the room before I do any more programming. What do you think, Richard? Before we start telling you about more stuff to come, let's see if anyone's. So I know Lars came and mentioned.
I see Mark's here.
I'm here, but I'm so sorry. I think I've only just caught on that you only come in. You only come in when you're going to say something. I thought it was going to be kind of Zoom-like. So I do have things to say, but I'd like to collect myself before I sort of splurge out everything.
That's fine.
Go. So I'm going
to let him go.
For a
you can go.
Thank you.
Charlotte.
I can say something to kick off if that would be right. If no one else is ready to come in our goldfish bowl.
Goldfish bowl is to come. The goldfish bowl is actually.
Oh, this isn't the goldfish bowl.
Not yet. No, this is just and that's why I'm not saying anything actually, because I'm sort of holding my peace for the goldfish bowl.
Okay, all right. So I was going to contribute to to a response actually. Well, this could come now. I think. Is it about the whole symposium? I thought what was very interesting, really, and I think maybe it is the case with a lot of symposiums, either online or offline, which is that you get a group of people paying attention to one subject, and people who are actually involved in it in their different lives, and they come together. We all come together, as artists, practitioners, and we share our focus on one subject. And it just creates an incredible ambience and a feeling of connectiveness that we don't normally have in ordinary life always. And my thought was this: in one of the sessions, I'm not going to pronounce his name right. Sambat Holokan, I think his name was, from Algeria. No, not Algeria. Where was he from? I've forgotten now. Oh, Armenia. He was from Armenia, and he told this amazing story about how they used to have funerals that were kind of held by the community. But when that had all shifted to an institutional setting, that everybody didn't feel again, and they didn't feel together. They weren't able to express themselves. And so my response really here for the whole symposium is, how can we best create those kinds of communal spaces where we are allowed to feel, we are allowed to share this bigger attention on things like death, on ecological grief, on these great subjects that are always around us, but we can't, we're so distracted by everything. How can we encourage that in our lives more? How can we meet in the same spirit? I don't know. I don't know. Is that the kind of thing you're supposed to do in this session?
Great question. And I think that's, to be honest, you can see the definition of what you're allowed to do in this session is up for grabs. So do what Charlotte's done and just say what's on your mind. And I think that's great. I'm not going to try and answer the question, although other people might like to. Maybe we're in the middle of one answer to it, and then we're going to take home the space to look for others.
I think it's very difficult, isn't it, Matt? It's you don't feel you have permission in your ordinary life to speak like this.
Mark, yeah.
Well, thank you, Charlotte, because that really seconded something. I think the whole thing has been absolutely fascinating, and I'm actually in the same house as Charlotte, and I'm okay at the moment. I've been feeling a bit sort of dodgy, but kind of okay. And it's been, I felt like I was in a slightly altered reality. And then, of course, it was Samhain. It was the Day of the Dead, Halloween. It was that time. So often around those kind of what I would call doors, those 8 doors of or gates, if you like, to during the year. You do feel slightly different. So when you're not feeling that great, it's accentuated, and this was so intense that I felt like I was slightly in an altered reality, but that was really, really great, and I thoroughly enjoyed everything I was hearing from whether it was Catherine Poole talking about things like talking about the way she drew her images. Based on these really physical kind, like she took the bus from where she lived into Preston, and it's this physical, even though it was a hop in. I felt with a lot of things that there was the physicality. When the people brought the physicality, and you really got it. The woman who Kim, I think her name was, working in Whittington Hospital, where I actually happened to have been born. That was quite interesting. Taking staff of the hospital in to take photographs on Hampstead Heath, and I used to live near Hampstead Heath for a long time, and got a real sense of the fact. Yeah, of course I knew it was nature, but this kind of brought this sense of nature and the natural world into things. I really, really enjoyed your interview with Jennifer Abbott, Matt. I thought that was really great. Both of you were saying great things there, and the storytelling. I kind of, by that time, I was like, I can't deal with storytelling. No, not after everything that's been going on. Another story, and they always go on for hours. The storytellers, they go on and on. They tell stories. They're great, but I just wasn't in the mood. And I caught a sentence out of my ear and thought, I've got to watch this and sit down and watch this stuff all about the ash trees and the mythology. That was really good. I just feel, it's like death is such a big subject. As you were saying, Matt, I think the bigger deaths, the small deaths, but the bigger deaths that are going on invisible to us, but that we can see the effects of with the climate crisis and all these kind of things. It's really important to tap into that numbness you were talking about, that that how can we as a small sentient being on the planet deal in some emotional way with this? And I think that was very good when it struck me when you said that before, actually, about the numbness. I would not say I was a numb person, but I really related to that too. I thought all the sessions I've seen had something amazing in them, and then the one this morning with Sophie Strand and Catherine and everything was, you know, and you, Richard, talking about, actually, please don't apologize for that graphic description of the of the insides, because, you know, that's, again, it's physical. It brings you right into the room, brings you what we don't normally talk about. And I think the whole thing of this talking about having a space to talk about, it's only just really beginning. I think this is really a fantastic symposium that you know, it could be developed with people who've seen it, to hold these kinds of conversations all over the place. I just really good on you for it. It's been really good.
We did, thanks to Matt, I think, who initiated it. But thank you, Mark, for that. Sorry, thank you, Mark. When we had our early gatherings with the steering group, rather than spending all of that time talking about practicalities, Matt set up a number of what we ended up calling death cafes. Plague cafes, which is even better, sorry. Which were just kind of rambling conversations, but I think very fruitful, and perhaps, you know, that's one way of continuing the thrust. But I want to read in from Aubrey in Corvaya, who is one of our speakers, who says she's feeling a bit too shy to come on the screen, but she wants to put in. She said, thank you, this event, its speakers and art, expanded and deepened me, the way I see the world and my place within it. Thus far, I have largely been studying able-bodied human death. So I'm really grateful for that work and the journey it's offered. Indeed, it brought me here, introducing me to a better understanding of the Anthropocene, chronic illness and disability, and multi-species considerations. So I commit to probing these cracks, as in bio, and will hope that my agency in doing so will help others engage grief to better associate with and take action on those topics that many of us are inclined to deny. Really, thanks again. That was from Aubrey. So then, Matt, this is a bit where we have to busk while we're waiting for other people to...
Carrie's got I could almost just use your mic, couldn't I? Because I'm sitting right next to you. Maybe that's easier. Yeah, that's fantastic, Aubrey. I'm going to kind of resist answering each one in turn, but really appreciating what's coming out. But Carrie's here, and I know I'm getting loads of reverb. I don't know how to do about this.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, it was just to respond to what Charlotte said, and it was reminding me that there have been lots of moments where I've been really moved over the last couple of days, but one of them was quite surprising for me in the extent to which it kind of really gave me sort of a sense of longing, and that was in Jennifer Abbott's film, and it was the scene where, I can't remember any of their names, but the Australian climate activists were sitting around a kitchen table having a conversation with, I think, a psychotherapist and somebody else from the community. And there was something about that moment of those three people sitting around a kitchen table talking in the way that they were about their experiences that was, it gave me that same kind of longing, I think, the one that you might be describing, Charlotte, of what sort of spaces can be made where those kind of conversations can happen. And then I got to reflecting about how that scene had, without really kind of knowing how Jennifer arrived at that in her process, but that sort of occurred as a result of the process of her making the film and telling the story that she wanted to tell through that film. So I suppose I'm wondering about the role of the artist in facilitating or creating the opportunities for those kind of spaces to come about. But yeah, I just wanted to sort of say that what you said resonated with me, and also I think what Mark was saying as well, and about those kind of conversations. That's me done.
I love the thread that Charlotte's opened actually by asking that question. I feel like it's a really, really good one to bring into this space. And I'm going to wish Lars is here. So Helen, thank you for that. And I'm going to bring that in unless you'd like to read it yourself. But let's have Lars first, because it's good to see you again, Lars. And you popped on and then off again.
No, I'll just make it brief then, because I was
no
in
pressure.
fear of how and what's in now. I also gonna, just go with what had been just brought up there. First of all, I wanted to thank really the whole team who are, big time. It was unfortunate for me that I couldn't really participate in the way I would have wanted to, because I'm in between places and stuff like that. But I think what came to me a lot also was what I also had experienced in one or two conferences. Other than that, it was always this sense of community that kind of emerged through the thing, and that's finally, certain themes are being addressed, and again in the, and to me that in itself, or the encounter, the exchange, that's, I feel there's something very fertile and very necessary also coming up. That's how I see it. And so I would in a way ask how to harvest this, how to maintain it, and to how to give it a vessel or tools that, all those people that met somehow, or find that they can somehow have, I don't know, a monthly thing. It feels a little bit like a sangha, like a Buddhist sangha, where you really have, okay, we all know what we're talking about in a way, you know what I mean? And so I would think that would be a beautiful thing to kind of keep things going, and also then prepare fertile ground for other things blossoming out of this. So thank you very, very much also for it was really fine, the curating and everything and all the efforts. That's it from me. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Lars. I just wanted to respond to that in a little way. And I think what's been interesting for us, being veterans of organising face-to-face events, is what's been different. And the primary differences are that I think when people come to a physical event, particularly if they've come a long way, their lives are in suspension largely. So people aren't being pulled away by other things, and there's a kind of an intensity that is harder to make happen online. And I think some of that has been true in that, not everybody has been there for everything, and that's absolutely fine. But what surprised me is that there has been an intensity, there has been a real sense of connection of ideas and people. And how do we carry that on? Well, it's the perennial question that always comes up with the energy of these kinds of events. Is how do you maintain that? And the answer is it's very, very difficult. But if we can offer up a space for people to engage in, that's the best we can do. The best we can do is to open up possibilities for continuing engagement, and then it's over to you guys. And it's up to you to expand the people from the group that we're here, ask people in. So we will look at this, we'll really explore. We already do a kind of monthly gathering, but that has a very much of an art focus. So we will look at this. We'll think about how we can do this more than simply kind of trying to make a record on the website. We'll try to make it a much more active thing.
I'd actually really like to pick up a reply to Lars's suggestion, which kind of builds on what both Carrie and Charlotte have said. But I'm going to do so via a comment from Helen Ottaway. Helen says, the session with Caroline, Tom and Matt completely changed the way I feel about death. I wasn't expecting personal change from this conference, which has been surprising in so many ways. And firstly, that's really lovely to hear. And I really just want to say me too, actually, Helen, particularly, well, it was that conversation with Caroline for me and Tom, and were very powerful, actually. They really, I wasn't expecting that either. I was just sort of thinking about coming to the session prepared. And what I wanted to bring as an offering to this question of Sangha or connection or communities, dispersed communities, is not an instead of the proposition of meeting once a month or setting up a space and doing it, because I think that's brilliant. That's how, let's seed as many as we can. And of course, what will happen is then some people will be able to do them and some won't, and then you get FOMO or whatever. But Caroline, Tom, Charlotte, and I, we all know each other from these sessions. Dark Mountain opened a space like this 10 years ago. It comes and it goes, it drops away. People, the last event I went to with Dark Mountain was in 2016. So it's a little while ago since I've sat in a room with people. But the connections are real and they come up again. And I feel like there's a slower burn to that connectivity as well, without being insular and always like circling around with the same people. It's really wonderful. I met old friends today and saw something completely new from them. And I've known Caroline so 5-7 years, and it was really just like a new, and Tom, I've known Tom longer than that, actually, known him 11 years. So I think part of this for me, against the language of urgency, which is pressing hard in our ears and has got a lot to do with the context of this conference, there's also that sense of, what will happen over the next 11 years will happen over the next 11 years, and hopefully most of us will be around for it to happen to. So, I mean that in an optimistic way. Kind of could dig myself into a hole there. So
you could.
Let's go to Mark. Good to see you, Mark.
Hello. Is my microphone working? Wonderful. First of all, thanks to everybody, because one thing that even those of us who know don't really know how much invisible work goes into things like this. Whatever we see front of house, as it were, is usually 5% of the work that you've been doing behind the scenes to keep the show running. So a zillion thanks for that. Many things to say. I think that the sessions have been absolutely magnificent, and the materials, the performances, the dances, the movies, incredibly rich, so rich that it's difficult to assimilate it all. It'll probably be a week before I'll be able to say something coherent about it. It feels like a 7-course dinner. It's wonderful. But the key is, I think communication, because so many people, Charlotte made this point just 10 minutes ago, especially in academia, and I think even more so in the arts, people work in such a specific way that it's not uncommon for artists and philosophers to be awake at 4:30 in the morning working on a problem until tiny beads of blood appear on their foreheads, and they get what alcoholics call a moment of insight. They think, this is fucking mad. Am I the only person in the world who cares about this? And sometimes the answer is yes. But events like this, I think, sort of give people a chance to think, no, I'm not the only one. And communication is the important thing, because instead of a sort of general hand-wringing and sort of depressive lamentation, I think what we have from the first session onwards is a sense of, yes, we're in the middle of, we're at the beginning of a catastrophe. We're in the foothills of extinction's Alps. However, in the words of William S. Burroughs, only a disaster could save us. There's a real sense, I think, of a community of ideas bubbling together, and a sense of courage, rather than a council of despair. That's come across in so much of the work I've seen. I'm thinking of the musicology lady who was speaking with us yesterday, June. She's devoted her life to education and music, and as I think it was H.G. Wells who once said, the human race is essentially a race between catastrophe and education. And unless we carry on with communications like this, we may as well pack up the circus right now. There's I think it's Terence McKenna, I think it was, who came with that lovely phrase that it was communication which turned us from a bunch of violent pack hunting monkeys. Once we could communicate with each other, we were a bunch of violent pack hunting monkeys with a plan. And And these plans are important. The future is not a sealed box. Our fate has not been delivered to us. It is malleable. It is malleable. It's conditioned, heavily conditioned by the shit we've done in the past, but it's still malleable. So I think a sense of optimism in this has really bubbled through, and the sense that rather than death as a terminus, the nearness of death is in fact a vector. I'm thinking of the felt shrouds that we were looking at. That a blanket is a comfort blanket in some ways, but it's also a travel blanket. Yeah,
I think that
the nearness of death is a vehicle as much as a. Yeah.
I think that idea of death is not a terminus came up certainly in several sessions I was in different ways. So one of them absolutely was with Yuli and her felt shrouds, but it came up in Linda Weintraub's wonderful contemporary art discourse when she was sharing a Korean artist who is making mycelial covers for the dead, so that the body can actually begin to grow its own fungi.
Yes, that was magnificent.
And that was the same discussion, that the human body is merely beginning another journey, giving back to the earth what it has claimed. Sadly, that equation is not very well balanced at the moment. We tend to take far more than we give back, but I think acknowledging that the body goes on another journey and gives something back to the earth, if we allow it, if we don't shroud ourselves in embalming fluid and precious metals, if we allow ourselves to be reconsumed by the earth, then we have given something back. I wanted to thank you, Mark. Actually, you've been a very active participant throughout the event, and your voice has been very present. And thank you for that.
You don't have to thank me for that. That's neuropathy. I mean, I chewed the ear off a brass dog at the side of the fireplace. Well does love me.
I wasn't going to say it that way.
I suspect you were sleeping this morning, Mark, when
comatose, mate. Absolutely comatose.
Richard and I were doing a shout out for your and Elizabeth vigil, which was just such a wonderful piece of work. There's so much thought gone into that, and I was saying I just urge everyone to it. It's there, isn't it? Is it in the expo? Did you mention last night? We were being a bit vague about whether other people could interact with that now. I'm not sorry to put you on the spot if that's a. Anyway, it was. I got through 4 lessons out of how many there were, and at 1:30 I realised I'd better sleep if I'm going to be here today. And but it was. It's a beautiful piece of work, and
thank you very much. At some point we'll put it on YouTube and just we'll title it sort of like 9-hour death trip for killing hippies.
Yeah, that's it. That's the name.
It did have a certain psychedelic element to it. I think it was a space. For me, it was a space of the space between sleeping and waking at both ends of the night. So as I went to bed with it on my laptop, just making there's such an interweaving of elements. And so occasionally some words would come out, but then we'd be back in the music, or there'd be some beautiful singing. And it was a woven.
Oh,
piece.
Thank you, because I mean that's precisely what we aimed at. That that river of mercury in between consciousness and unconsciousness, or
exactly.
awake in the.
That was precisely
the alchemical sort of.
Yeah.
Both awake and asleep and dreaming while awake.
Yeah, that was precisely my experience of it. In the morning as well, when I kind of flipped up the laptop to restart it at probably, I don't know, 5:30 or something. So that I was in that state of not entirely being awake, and yet it was coming into my consciousness. So anyway, thank you for that, and it will be great if those who didn't. There were more people there than you thought last night, because we looked at the numbers this morning.
Oh, wonderful!
And if it can be available to others to experience, it must be a rule that it has to be nighttime. It's definitely not a daytime
No, it's not. It's not a daytime experience. And many thanks to Matt. We had a wonderful conversation over the email, which I honestly think, if I edit, there's a few wandering bits, but the wander in a good way. If I edit it, I think we should have that as part of your material for this gig, because it was a wonderful education about materialism, the sacred, and life, afterlife experiences. Ego, death, and psychedelics, all sorts of things. It was wide ranging, but edited, I think it could be quite precise. Thanks, Matt. That was great.
It was that roll you get on at 1 a.m, isn't it? I was lovely, sparkling, and also because this is the first time we've met face to face. So
yes,
you know, I sometimes bemoan chat threads and sort of say, oh God, please, we're not setting up. I don't mean about last night, but you know, if someone's organizing an event and I'll say, can we just make sure it's all face to face on screen at least, and not on a fucking chat thread? And actually, last night was fantastic, and I had a sense, because I had your voice in my ear throughout your voices, so I knew who I was talking to somehow. You know, it was yeah. And I suppose it's about scale, isn't it? It's about scale. Mm-hmm. You know, there wasn't like 50 people on the thread, and there was a few. Richard would kind of wonder and think, "Is Richard asleep now?" And then he'd pop up again. You know. So.
It's funny how we've redefined what we mean by face to face.
Yes. Yeah. Pixel.
We're sitting right next to each other, actually, but.
Like we could sort of reach up and.
Helen has made a comment about. That there were some links circulated last night, which you managed to save. I think, Helen, do you mean individual or yeah, so actually any of those kind of things that people have been putting into chat, and links and books and references and all kinds of things is saved and will be part of the record once we've finished editing it all and trying to make a little bit of sense out of it. So it will be there. Because there has been a great deal of valuable stuff happening in the chat as well. It was a wonderful example of that was in my session this morning when Sophie Strand mentioned a book and kind of held it up, but she didn't have access to the chat, so I think she was on a tablet or something. And within moments, 2 people had popped in with a reference and a link. Because they've been busy looking it up. So that was a very good example of how cooperative and collaborative this little community has become. Emma, I don't know if you want to come in or if you want me to read. Let me know in the chat if you'd like me to. Actually, it's really just a thank you piece. So I'm probably not going to bring it in.
But. I think some questions are coming up maybe that might be that people have tuned in after the 2 o'clock welcome. It might be worth saying again, just so people know. It's really lovely. Sort of what's the word? You know, it's lovely to hear nice things about what you've done. But this wasn't primarily a space for us to sort of set up a space so we could all bask in people being nice to us. It was more to try and create a space to speak in a more specific way to each other's work and to things that had come up. And I'm enjoying both, so don't get me wrong. But I just if people are coming in late and wondering what we're doing here, the main kind of gig, the main gig here is was there anything that's happened this week that you'd like to speak back to? And we're getting some lovely thoughts around that. And to answer Barbara's question about the residual from the conference and how we'll access it, it's going to be most, unless in 1 or 2 cases for good reason, you know, that the presenter said, actually, I'd rather that wasn't recorded and put online. I'd prefer to keep it live. Most of what we've done will be recorded, will be uploaded, unless you'd like to veto it yourself as a presenter. But that won't happen tomorrow. And Richard was making a cautious target of by the end of the month, because it's quite a lot of work and the man needs a rest. So,
and can I just say as well that if those who weren't here at the beginning, why were you late? No, I didn't mean that. If those of you weren't here at the beginning, we did explain how that process of sharing is going to happen. And in fact, I see that Kat has put a précis of that into the event chat. So if you're wondering about how things are going to be and where they're going to be and all of that, thank you, Kat, for putting it out. Kat's next to me as well. It's amazing. We're all together. We've spent much of the last few days spread out in this building, so we weren't talking over one another. and then finally we're sitting around the table together. So thanks, Kat, for putting that in the event chat. So do flip over there and you'll find you'll see what the plan is for sharing everything.
Something else I thought was incredibly important about what's happened in the last 72 hours is the sense how a thread that's run through so many of the sessions is, I think, a sense of whatever happens has to come from the bottom up. There is a, not cynical, but I think a very wise mistrust of top-down hylomorphic solutions. I'm thinking of a session where there were people talking about death doulas and the emotional and psychological care of the dying in terms of psychedelics and in terms of art practices and in terms of psychotherapy and so on and so forth. And I was chatting to some people after that, and there's this worry that the professionalization of these things may sound a death knell, because once stuff gets professionalized, it gets hoovered up by capital. And if one is a death midwife and one has to become accredited, so on and so forth, what will almost certainly happen is what's happened to midwives over the last 15 years in the UK, whereas the amount of public liability insurance they need to pursue that profession makes it impossible for them to do. And so we, through professionalization and well-meaning government intervention, we'll be left where we were in the 1980s at the closing pages of Philip Irie's book, The Hour of Our Death. Only the very wealthy and the absolutely poor will get decent end-of-life care. Yeah. I think that's sort of not cynicism, but awareness of unintended consequences of trying to govern, or Prince Charles's speech at COP yesterday, that we need leadership and go on a war footing. That kind of masculine managerial dominator ideal is what got us in a fucking mess in the first place. The idea of more of the same will save us is hysterical, absolutely hysterical. Yeah? So I think, like I said, not cynicism, it's just now I think a general and profound awareness that we can't leave this to leaders and managers. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Mark. Tom, would you like to come in?
I will. Hi, Mark, as well. I've been really enjoying your contributions, and I didn't get to the vigil last night, but I will look at it through the expo.
It's there to horrify people for years to come, I'm sure.
It sounds great. And I love the sound of the thread between you and Matt as well. Sounds great. I just made a comment about love, really. And it seems to me, I've got something written down here that I think you said, Matt. Well, it's in my notes from your talk, your poem. If you love something, you hope. You don't really get to decide. And I think it's the love that I'm leaning on there, and the it not being a conscious choice either. And I feel like that. I feel like within a creative practice, it is. I think it comes out of a love for something, and we're all here because we are, we love our. How do we put it? I don't want to say we love the earth, because it suggests that the earth isn't us. And I think I'm coming very much from the point of view of the earth is us and we are the earth. It's the separations that are tricky, and love creates, closes those separations and joins things together, creates I talked about it in my presentation, but the bridging of things. And I think that's something that has been important for me over the past few years, actually, my own practice. Whereas day-to-day life feels like it, immersed in the top-down ways of viewing the world. The creative practice enables the bottom-up to be sustained, and to and for me that's become a spiritual practice as well, and realizing that we're quite detached. This illusion of us as beings being separate from all other beings, and the earth that sustains us. Is something that I think, I can't quite so clearly pick out, but I've got, images of Caroline's knives and a little bone holding her needles. I've got images from yesterday of I think Barbara and Cynthia and their exhibitions, and soil on the floor and all the that. And then yes, the talk, I can't remember the presenter's name, but the psychedelics and end of life care. Mark, you made a really valuable comment about, which I hadn't even thought about, but the impact of how the psychedelics would work alongside the pharmaceutical drugs and these kind of complexities. It all seems to me to be about, I don't know, about love. I don't know how else to put it, but it just is embracing, coming together and finding a way of dealing with what we're dealing with. And a lot of the time I can feel quite alone, actually. So being part of this is, that's why I sort of make the effort to do these things. And it's been, I've had COVID last week. I'm still sort of coming to the end of it, and it's not been a terrible thing. I mean, I've had very little symptoms. My daughter had it, brought it into the house. My wife and newborn baby are out of the house, down at her parents' house. So it's been this weird detached, week of detachment. But then, what a wonderful unifying experience being here. So, yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Tom. I think it's time. I know it seems slightly odd that we are now going to say, let's leave this session and go into the other one. And there's a simple reason for that.
Basically be more the same. We're going to play with a slightly different rule and see how it works. But thanks for everyone who's spoken, and including in the chat as well, and to those listening. That last session will also include a wrap for the whole event. So if you don't want to sort of take an active part in it, maybe do come in anyway towards the end, and you can just listen in, and there'll be a couple of announcements of things yet to happen over the next 4 or 5 weeks that people will be able to plug into. So yeah, come and drop in at some part of it towards the end if you don't want to come for the whole thing.
Yeah, so please do leave, but don't leave. Come back. So come back into part 2. Okay, we'll see you in a minute.